Okay, good.
Okay, so Charity Wallace, thank you so much for talking to Real Leaders today. I believe you create social impact around the world through family offices, and I wanted to ask you more about the kind of work you do and the impact you're having on the world.
Sure. So I had the privilege of working with George and Laura Bush during their 8 years at the White House and was able to travel to more than 70 countries with them. And what I saw is the true impact on the ground of programs that are happening both by international NGOs as well as corporations that were partnering in combination with the public sector. And so from that experience, I actually also saw how women are transformational in communities and countries. And we know now from research that women make significant change when we invest in women. They reinvest 90% of their income back into society versus 30 to 40% of men. And when we educate women, their girls are more educated, they have healthier families, they have healthier society. So utilizing that background and that expertise and experience, I've been able to work with corporations and international nonprofits as well as family foundations to help them think strategically about how to use their resources more effectively to make social impact.
Right.
So that can be everything from helping youth that are transitioning out of foster care, needing jobs, and so working with corporations to help them hire those individuals, or helping women from around the world to have economic opportunity.
Right. From what I've noticed, philanthropic ventures seem to be one of America's greatest exports.
That's true.
Do you find a very crowded marketplace for the kind of work you do in parts of the world that's needed? I mean, how do you coordinate different people from different countries and from the US as well, duplicating efforts?
I think that is a challenge, actually, is the duplication of efforts. But that's why I think it's wonderful to work with corporations to identify what they would like to make an impact on, and then connecting with implementers on the ground so that they can actually their resources can go further. There's less duplication then. And like you said, I mean, America's very unique in the way that it's a very philanthropic society. And there's a sense of duty and a sense of desire to sort of give back. And so that is, I think, incredibly important for people, but it is identifying the right partners for you so that you aren't duplicating efforts, and identifying individuals so that they can actually leverage what each other is doing to make a greater impact.
70 countries to travel to is an incredible number for most people. Can you share one or two experiences you had in those countries that really moved you emotionally?
Sure. When I was with Laura Bush, when we were in Zambia, we met with a young woman who was 12, whose father died of AIDS and whose mother was killed. And she was the head of her household, so she had 3 siblings that were younger than she was. And her family her uncles and aunts ended up taking their house away. So she ended up on the street. And there was a very large organization, World Vision, who works on the ground in all different countries. They came in and enabled her and her brothers, her 3 younger brothers, to move into a location in which they housed a lot of the orphans and vulnerable children from that area of the world. A lot of people lost their families from AIDS, and it was during the AIDS crisis. And so when I was working in the White House, we worked on the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. And she was a beneficiary of that because her life was saved through the World Vision program that helped the OVCs from that crisis.
Right.
And when she was telling her story, I couldn't imagine as a 12-year-old. I remember me as a 12-year-old riding my bike and doing dance and things like that. And her big concern was being able to feed her brothers and herself. And because of World Vision's intervention through the PEPFAR program, she was able to go back to school. They housed her and she had a safe place to be, and they fed her. And I remember sitting in a very small sort of hut with Mrs. Bush and this little girl, and her telling her story to a number of us from the staff, and really understanding why we need to support these young girls and women all over, because her life now has a different trajectory. And those are the kinds of programs and the kinds of stories that spur us on to do this work. It's really, really critical.
You have so much influence in redirecting resources to areas of need, and there are so many areas of need in the world right now. How do you decide which ones to address first?
When you look, there's like you said, there's so many problems around the world, and it can become very overwhelming. I think depending on who you're working with, depends on what they want to focus on. I know the best interventions, or because of research and data and because of what I've seen on the ground, I know the best interventions for women and girls in particular. We also know interventions for all different kinds of things, climate change, water, all of those are specific issues. So depending on what the Family Foundation wants to focus on, and some of that is just a passion that somebody has, then you can identify exactly the best way to utilize their resources. But also then it is looking at research and data to say, we know that this is the best way to transform a community. And so that's how we identify how to focus resources.
And you obviously have a very big heart and lots of empathy. Can you tell me where that comes from? Was there a point in your life where you decided this is who you were?
Well, I think my name is Charity, and people ask me if it's my real name. You know, my parents, as we grew up as kids, it was always part of our family, and just the idea of giving back. Not that we grew up with a lot necessarily when I was young, but I did get to see why it's important, and I have a strong faith, and it comes a lot from my own personal faith, but also from the example that my parents had, and the opportunity to give back as a younger person, to volunteer and do things like that, and then the opportunity then to work in such a transformative way.
And what advice would you give to the young generation of today, who seem to be very proactive? I'm not sure if they need adults' help anymore. They seem to be on their, motivated by themselves these days. But what advice would you give to young people today to get involved in social causes, and especially develop a worldview, which I think is really important. Just being able to see different cultures from different angles.
That's exactly right. I think absolutely having that global view, not from your Instagram, because Instagram, everything looks perfect and beautiful. What we really need to do is have opportunities for kids to give back in their own communities, because each community has challenges, both in the United States as well as all over the globe. And so I think actually looking outside of ourselves and having the opportunity to volunteer. And like I said, a lot of people, for me, I had to volunteer in a number of different kinds of programs. So whether it was homelessness or an outreach to women, or those are the kinds of things that you can do as a volunteer in your own. And I know what I ended up becoming very passionate about, but I only learned that through having opportunities to volunteer in different kinds of organizations. So I would say go research something that you think you're interested, identify an opportunity to go volunteer, and get outside of yourself and give back.
Great. And which country is next for you?
That's a great question. Hopefully back in Africa at some point. I've been to over 15 countries in Africa, and it's so transformative.
Right.
And
what about Africa is transformative for you?
I think part of it is the joy that the citizens have there. When you look around and you see the lives in which they live, and there's such a difference between my life and their life, and yet they have incredible joy. And I think it doesn't matter what you have that brings you joy. It's your attitude and your gratitude. And it's just a magical place in a lot of ways. They've gone through so much challenge and struggle, and yet they still have hope and joy for the future, and it's contagious. And I also think that very little money goes a very long way in a lot of different developing countries when it comes to supporting different programs. And so you can see the incredible impact that you can have on someone's life with very small amounts of money.
Great. Charity, thank you so much for talking to us, and safe travels on your next journey.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Very
Goodbye.
nice to meet you.